Good evening and welcome to Talk of the Neighborhoods. I'm Joe Heisler, your host, coming to you from the BNN Live studios, Eggleston Square, Jamaica Plain, where tonight on the Boston Neighborhood Network, well, we'll bring you our usual helping of politics tonight, state and local. First up tonight, the man who could have been, and many people say should have been, mayor of the city of Boston. Despite his loss in the preliminary last year, continues to put forth provocative, thought-provoking ideas, issues. Tonight, joining us on the first half, former City Council President Mike Ross to talk about life after politics. And then on the second half, we continue our coverage of election 2014. Joining us, another of the Democratic candidates running for state treasurer, the post being given up by Steve Grossman, who's running for governor. Tonight, Deb Goldberg, a philanthropist, a successful businesswoman, political activist, making her second run for statewide office, joins us to talk about her bid for this important constitutional post. All that and more tonight on Talk of the Neighborhood. I'm Joe Heisler, your host. Tonight on this first half, he is a familiar face, having served in the Boston City Council for several years, including as its president last year, making a run for mayor of the city of Boston, ultimately unsuccessful. But that hasn't stopped Mike Ross from saying what he thinks and thinking what he says, including most recently in a series of columns in the Boston Globe. And I'm very pleased to have joining us tonight former City Council President and member Michael Ross. And nice to have you here, Michael.
Joe, good to be
back.
back.
Nice to see you back.
Good to be here.
Well, first off, I have to compliment you because I would have to say that I thought that you ran the smartest campaign for mayor amongst a large field. Perhaps ultimately the people that you targeted or might have been most likely to vote for you didn't turn out, but that doesn't take anything away from your campaign because I thought you really kind of broke the mold there. How are you feeling?
Thank you. Yeah, no, Joe, it was a great honor. That voter didn't necessarily come out. Perhaps that was in the end what did me in, but it was an amazing experience.
No regrets at having given up your seat and running?
No, I mean, I had been in for 14 years. I was the president of the Boston City Council, and I had a chance to contribute to the new discussion that I see now in play. It was interesting as we bantied ideas on that campaign. Many of the better ones came to the surface, and now you see guys like John Barrows running the economic development arm, Felix Arroyo working on the children and families, of course the mayor, Marty Walsh. A lot of the discussion that occurred during the campaign made its way to some of the policy you're seeing implemented today. Great honor, love doing it, and now I'm a Citizen Ross, which is like, the most interesting thing about this whole thing is that every night there's not three things, and I loved what I did, but I have to tell you that, here in the summer of 2014, not having a barbecue, not having a parade, not having, three events every night, and being able to maybe go from the beach to, say, dinner, as opposed to the beach to, say, a house party. For decades, for over a decade, it's great, and I'm kind of enjoying having that.
And spending more time with your family as well. I know, we were talking before we came on air about your dad, who of course is well known throughout the city, and one of the last remaining Holocaust survivors. And you recently had a very interesting appointment as well. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was honored to be appointed by the President of the United States to serve on the United States Holocaust Memorial. It's a presidential appointment. There are 55 slots. The person that I'm actually taking the place of is Hadassah Lieberman, right? Who's Senator Joe Lieberman's wife. So that's a 5-year term. It's a huge honor, and I get to work on issues around education, equality, justice that the Holocaust Museum stands for, and at the same time, it's a great tribute to the memory of my family who I lost, my grandparents, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, and also carry some of the work that my father did. He founded the Holocaust Memorial here in Boston 20 years ago, and so now we're approaching the 20th anniversary of that. So that's actually a great opportunity for me, and in some ways a great example of the things you can do kind of after political office.
A great honor as well. Again, Michael Ross, now Citizen Ross, as he likes to call himself. Well, how is Mayor Marty Walsh doing? Not to put you on the spot, but...
It's okay. Put me on the spot. I came on knowing that Larry King of Boston would do so. I think he's doing well.
Yeah.
And the BRA thing, for example. I would have advised him not to start with the BRA. Start with inspectional services instead, because there's more low-hanging fruit and probably more that can be done there. But boy, did he did he get that right? Yeah. For him to find out that there are millions of dollars of uncollected debts owed to the citizens of Boston, owed to the city of Boston through the BRA, and they were not being covered. I mean, that's a political and a governing victory that he saw through. And I would have second-guessed that initially, again, as being that the starting point for what he wants to look into, and he was right. So, even in places where I might have actually thought differently, I think he's doing well. He's also making some movements towards where I think our city needs to go and grow.
Such as?
Being open later, around being more available to newcomers, around being more accessible for younger, as well as traditional neighborhoods, but being able to kind of knit both. And since he comes from that traditional neighborhood background, for him to be also talking to a new demographic, to a new Bostonian, is good for our economy, for our culture, and for our city in general.
How about some of the business practices that you trumpeted during your candidacy, which I thought were very creative, perhaps long overdue. Will we get there? Do you like what you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, that is kind of the question that still is being answered, right? How fast can we grow, and how fast can housing, for example, be put down in this city? I mean, be created in this city, not put down, but built in this city, in all of our neighborhoods, faster, in some cases, in more locations. There was a test, I think, there is a test in one of the neighborhoods right on Transit Realty where Larry Harmon wrote about it in the Boston Globe in Hyde Park. And I think the reflex of that neighborhood was, no, it's too big, and it wasn't that big. It's a small kind of apartment building that's on transit. Right. If you can't build along a transit line, then where can you? And I think that the mayor's approaching that, in the right way, saying, well, let's move forward. And I guess that is still unveiling. It's not for me to announce his policy, but tests like that will be where people are watching. Is this mayor going to build and create, a planning set of planning documents around zoning and heights and development that will allow Boston to house its residents, current and future? Or will we continue to grow so anemically that we're not keeping pace with population, and what we're only succeeding in doing is rising the cost of housing? That's the question that's still being answered.
Well, and of course, all the data that's been accumulated showing is the gap between the richest and poorest residents seems to be growing. You had a real interesting column recently in the Boston Globe about, well, first of all, paying tribute, about the effort to pay tribute to former City Council President Bruce Bowling, who passed away a couple of years ago. They're going to rename the Ferdinand Building in Dudley Square after him. But more so than that, talking about the linkage policy of the city and what we're doing, because it seems just all indicators point to the need for more housing, and of course to do that sometimes you step on a few toes. Is Marty Walsh willing to do that? Is there
well, you weave many kind of stories into this one kind of piece around Bruce Bowling. I mean, here again, another example of something Marty Walsh has done early in his term, naming this new building in Ferdinand, a symbol of Roxbury's regrowth, for Bruce Bowling, a former city council, the first black city council president. at the urging, by the way, of Ayanna Pressley, who brought the issue forward at the city council level, and at the urging, by the way, of, I think, Bruce Bowling's son, who saw an opportunity. Marty answering that call, naming that building. But I went back and said, well, what did Bruce do to earn
What's the
this?
legacy?
What is his legacy? And in fact, it's what you said, it's linkage. Linkage, and if you Google this word, it doesn't come up with the definition of what we call it here in Boston. What it is that anytime development occurs in the city above a certain size, above a certain square footage, and of certain uses, you wind up setting aside $10 a square foot for housing and for job creation. And over the years, over 27 years since this law was put forward by Bruce Bowling, a lowly city councilor at the time, $165 million has been set aside for Boston's poorest communities. And so last week, when an article came out in the Boston Globe that said, yes, there's a have and have not in this city like so many others, but in Boston, it's not as bad, it's not as vast, it's not as distant. A lot of that has to do with some of these policies that Bruce Bowling put in place, not just linkage, but a fair housing commission, the Boston residency job policy, which puts Boston workers, women, and people of color on construction
which
jobs.
Marty Walsh
Also championed, and,
yeah.
and where they met really in the field before Marty Walsh was the mayor of the city, when he was a state rep, when he was the head of the building trades. So this kind of coming together of these stories, of Marty Walsh's story, but also of the Bowling legacy, really made it an appropriate name, and it's why I wrote about it just this Sunday.
And how do you like sitting on the other side of the table? I mean, these journalists, they, well, we have our moments, and sometimes we don't. Yeah. But how are you liking this new Mike Ross, the citizen Ross, that's able to kind of say and think what he wants? And not that you didn't before. You always said.
Well, there's a difference. There's a key difference. I mean, so I'm writing now for the Boston Globe once a week for their opinion pages. And I mean, the great thing here is that I can say anything or offer anything and not actually have to do it, right? In the past, when I was in public office, you put forward policies that you hope you can get to. You can actually advance the ball on. When you're on the other side, as you say, you put forward ideas that you hope others will come and grab. And I think my knowledge of what's on the other side of the coin with what kind of I'm doing now is helping me hopefully write entertaining pieces for the public, but maybe also continue to move that ball down the field.
What kinds of things would you like to see as you think of, and hopefully you'll write about them too, because it turns out you're an excellent writer as well as as you were a public official. But what kinds of things, as you look forward, do you think the city should seriously be looking at here?
My pieces tend to talk about how to push the envelope, how to kind of move the city forward. Right now, but weaving it into just kind of classic stories that are interesting. Right now, I'm working on a piece about a different kind of a different way of owning companies, where employees and customers of companies are actually becoming the owners of companies, like a co-op model. But this is a model that was pioneered years ago. I frequently go up to Vermont, and anyone who's skied up in Mad River Glen, skied if you can, those bumper stickers, knows that this is a mountain that's actually owned by its employees and by its skiers. Very rare model. It's also the only single chair ski lift in the lower 48 of America, right? So it's a very unique place. Weaving those two stories together and trying to make it relevant for today about how places like Harpoon, for example, the brewery, which are now being owned by the employees of that company, how that's not a bad model for moving forward, and that sometimes these purists who are up in the Vermonts of the world coming up with these ideas, they're onto something. I think finding those ideas and bringing them forward is good public policy, is what I enjoy doing.
Well, different ways of looking at things. Now, of course, not to put you on the spot, but I never hesitate before. Why now? The governor recently signed a bill, legislature passed, and the governor recently signed a bill to expand the convention center authority. Now, some people say, that oh, I don't know if that's a good idea to invest that kind of money into it. It might be a white elephant. What about the Olympics? What do you think of that? The effort by John Fish, the owner of Suffolk Construction, and some others to put forth a bid for Boston to host the Olympics. What about those kind of grand ideas?
Look, on both fronts, and you got me, okay? I'm pro-grow, okay? I am a pro-grow. Let's move this city forward. Let's bring the Olympics. Let's expand the convention center, and not just for the sake of doing it. I mean, look, Boston has found a way to, with the convention center, for example, that was something that Bruce Bowling worked on. How do we put our people to work at the convention center and building the convention center? Well, we did, and we do. And the expanded convention center won't just do that, but it will also, it also has been under Jimmy Rooney's leadership, a very successful model. The Olympics is the same thing. Yes, there are a zillion ways you could mess up the Olympics. But if done right, there is so much we could gain from the Olympics in terms of our marketability of our brand across the world, whether we get it or not. And if we do get it, our ability to build this city. One of the things we're not good at in Massachusetts and in Boston is actually making those investments in roadways, in public infrastructure, in public transit, and in some of the places we really need to. If we have the Olympics here, there will be no mistaking. We will have to build out our city.
Kind of force us.
It will force us. It will force us to do the things we've been kind of holding back from doing. So if nothing else, the Olympics will force us kicking and screaming to pave our roads, to expand our public transit, to build our city out. It shouldn't have to take that, but if we do that and create tons of housing, by the way, for an Olympic Village, we're accomplishing a whole bunch of goals that we could otherwise need to do anyway.
Well, and you mentioned, we've got just a couple minutes left, you mentioned branding, but a lot of people kind of, I don't think, kind of understand the importance of kind of marketing, branding a product, and, so it sticks in people's minds.
Right.
And that's not a new business concept,
right.
But and Boston's been a very successful city because of its history, et cetera, but how do we kind of take it to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to be unafraid to move forward. I think we have to kind of get out of our own way. Sometimes no one punishes success more sometimes than our city, and we need to kind of stop that. I think that if let to go to its natural conclusion, I think this city, there's nowhere we won't be able to go. I think we're well positioned. We're well kind of positioned in terms of our people, our commerce, our business, our geography, everything. I mean, Boston is really, but we have to get out of our own way. We have to build housing. We have to create more businesses. We have to allow for some of these larger festivals. We have to really kind of embrace some of the changes.
And not be afraid.
Be unafraid. That's right.
Be unafraid. And last but not least, I can't let you go without asking you about your former colleagues, or at least those that are still there, and how are they doing? Of course, there's new council president, Bill Linehan. Well, let's see, where do we go from there? How are they doing? How's the council? It seems to have a different flavor. Of course, there's several new members, or a few different members now.
Yeah, in the Bruce Bowling article, I kind of end it by winking at this council and saying, look, and I would include myself in that. In fact, on that piece, I made sure to put at the bottom that I'm a former member of the body. But saying that, look, this is what one guy did. He was just a city councilor. 165 million, and this one law he wrote came into our city, and it's changed the way poor communities are able to act in major urban cities. If he can do that, then any one of you can do anything, if you just are willing to really move forward. And I think if people, again, if they kind of no fear and kind of not holding themselves back and kind of knock themselves out of the traditional kind of parochialism and norms that might have once defined the city, and instead kind of look towards that kind of bolder horizon, I think there's nothing you can't do in public policy, in the private sector, in the public sector, in terms of moving our city forward. And I would include this current Boston City Council in that. There are some real bright minds in that council, and some great people who want to make a difference. All of them are in it for, they love this city. They have reason to be able to move the city forward, and they need to, and they can, and they should.
Well, all big ideas start from a small kernel. Of course, you talked about the naming of the Ferdinand Building after Bruce Bowling. If you were still there, would you name the library in South Boston after Billy Bulger? Would you have any problem with that?
There was the Boston Globe editorialized around thumbs down on naming Billy Bulger, thumbs up on naming Ray Flynn. I don't live in South Boston, and I don't pretend to kind of call the shots for those communities either. But I think we have to be very careful about just throwing out names for public buildings. In the case of Bruce, Bruce Bowling, I spent a lot of time researching what he did, and I was amazed at the body of work and the sense of equity that he brought to that job. And I think that standard needs to be put in place. One of the things I noticed when I went back and looked at all these named buildings, there are 138 of them that I counted. Some of them are named for people that no one knows. One elementary school in Hyde Park is named for the William Ellery Channing Elementary School in Hyde Park. I mean, who is William Ellery Channing? Well, I look back, he was an early opponent of the abolitionist movement. He wasn't he was by no means some some race-hating horrible human. But he was he wasn't among the first to say let's end this. In fact, he said some pretty concerning things when it came to kind of justifying and apologizing.
Think carefully before you.
So we go. Yeah, exactly. Let's just be very careful about how we immortalize these names on the buildings that our young kids are walking into every single day.
Well, again, Michael Ross is now Citizen Ross, and very busy nonetheless. Somewhere between writing opinion pieces for the Boston Globe and most recently named to the U.S. Holocaust Commission by President Obama. And Michael, as always, nice to have you here.
Great to be
Enjoyed
here, Joe.
chatting with you.
Me too. Thank you.
Keep in touch, and we will as well. When we return with more of Talk of the Neighborhoods, well, we'll shift gears, but not by much. More politics this time. State politics. We're a little less than 3 weeks from the state Democratic Party state primary, of which there were several Democratic races, including the race for state treasurer. Last week you met Barry Feingold. Tonight, from Brookline, she is a successful businesswoman, philanthropist, political activist. Deb Goldberg joins us when we return with more of Talk in the Neighborhoods. I'm Joe Heisler, host, and in the second half, well, we shift back into campaign mode. It's less than 3 weeks until the primary election here in Massachusetts, and most attention is focused on the Democratic races. Of course, the gubernatorial race sucking up a lot of oxygen out there as we head for the home stretch. But just as important in the minds of many people, the races for Attorney General and State Treasurer, the seat that Steve Grossman is giving up to run for governor. And joining me tonight, one of those candidates. She is a successful business person, philanthropist, longtime political activist from Brookline, running as she did 8 years ago was the last time. This time to win the seat of state treasurer. Talking Deb Goldberg joins us. Nice to have you here.
Joe, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. Well, what got you back into this? We talked a little bit before we went on the air. You made a very spirited run 8 years ago, running for lieutenant governor, and you did very well.
Yes, we won the city of Boston. I know, that was pretty great. I've been a Democratic activist my whole life, literally. When I was 7 years old, there I was in my sparkle snowsuit. When my dad put the local guy running for, put me in his station wagon. That was Mike Dukakis, and it wasn't because he was running for governor or president. It was state rep.
State rep in Brooklyn.
And, we were always politically active within my family. We understood. It was always our values. We went back and we started a company. You know that my mother's great-grandmother had 11 kids in the north end of Boston, and every single friend or relative that arrived was given a job and a roof over their heads. Those families together grew in the food business, and that became Stop and Shop. And it was our values in play. I mean, it was good jobs, union jobs, 2-3 generations at a time. You probably knew a lot of people who worked at Stop and Shop. And it was jobs you could depend on. And I worked there the whole time, growing up first in high school as a member of 1445 out on American Legion Highway, and then later on as an executive after college, after I graduated BC Law School, and then again after Harvard Business School. And we went through a takeover. You might remember that too.
I do.
I bet you do.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty difficult thing hostile takeover. And we were forced out because we wouldn't fire our people. And so I took my business degree and my business background, my finance background, but my values, and I turned to the public sector. And so the history is there. I became chairman of the Board of Selectmen in Brookline. I'm the president of an adoption agency. I was one of the founders and the treasurer of a school for kids with severe cognitive disabilities. So what this really is that in our family for generations, our values have driven our work, both in the business world and our work among other areas in the nonprofit world and in the political world. I mean, my dad ran for local office.
Have we lost some of that? And I'm reminded, and I'm sure the whole story around the market basket and what's happening there, it's not the same kind of thing,
Very
but it
different,
involves,
actually.
in some ways, some of the same values, at least for the workers who believe in something. And
well, I fundamentally believe that we as people need to be thinking about how everything we do in life ties in together. And you asked what made me get back into statewide politics. I've been in since 2006. I didn't go away. I'm a town meeting member again in the town of Brookline. I'm a commissioner in the Neighborhood Conservation District Commission. I'm an elected state committee woman. I worked cycle to cycle, not just here in Massachusetts, and not just in Brookline, because we could sit in Brookline and go, oh, we elected Democrats, didn't we? No, I go down into tough areas like West Plymouth, Rentham, where the person comes from who thinks he's a New Hampshire resident now, but you know who I mean.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is that some really good people asked me to look at this. And as I said to you before we went on, I said only if I could be passionate about the job. And when I sat down with the present treasurer's chief of staff, I had known about a lot of the departments, having been chairman of the Board of Selectmen, working with school building assistants, needing the lottery dollars, being in the business of selling the lottery tickets. But I saw that everything in that office is what I care about. It is cash management, debt management, things I know how to do. Managing and investing the $55+ billion pension fund. I've done that kind of work in my own life, but also in the public sector, working with the retirement board, cost of living adjustments, making sure that seniors were secure. So
what would you do different? And Steve Grossman's a good guy, and I think a lot of people feel that he's done a good job as treasurer. But what would you do? Help us to understand how State Treasurer and Receiver Deb Goldberg would handle some of these tough issues. Pensions, of course, there's all kinds of talk about, and there has been some changes into, how alcohol licenses are regulated, ABCC, of course, the lottery, the threat of what casino gambling will do.
Well, as a matter of fact, which is very interesting, is that in Brookline, the Board of Selectmen are the licensing authority for the Alcoholic Beverage Commission licenses. So I had a significant amount of experience in that and how you can actually use it to put forth a public good and also protect people who should not be exposed to alcohol. So on that level, I followed what was going on in the city of Boston very closely. You know, and I know, almost 100 licenses for restaurants in the North End, 17 in Roxbury and Dorchester in the neighborhood that we're in right now, and that it is an economic driver. And so I was really pleased to see what was going on, that the City Council's efforts, that the mayor's efforts to get this passed in the legislature in terms of economic development, and that in the alternative, in Boston, we have too many what we call Section 15 licenses, which are package stores in the more disadvantaged areas of the city. And so what we did locally, and that I want to work with both the Senate chair and the House chair in the legislature, is we looked at ways so that if you have a package store that's near a school, you don't have the chill case with soda pop-like looking beverages right at the window where the school kids go by. We were able to, I use the word legislate loosely in quotes, but as you're awarding licenses, as you're working with package store owners, how you create a consciousness around not overly promoting underage alcohol consumption. But in the treasurer's office, there are so many things that I can also do in the public policy arena. I have the business skills and the finance skills.
Such as?
Financial, and you asked, what would I do differently? Not what I would do differently from Steve Grossman, how I would build on what he has begun and add to it. I want to be treasurer for a very long time. This is something that I am incredibly excited about. So financial literacy.
So you're not going to be running for governor in 4 years?
It's not the plan.
Okay.
I'm hoping this is my last contested race. But what I'm saying is that financial literacy, there is a financial literacy grant program at the state treasurer's office. Terrific pilot programs in high schools, with seniors, with veterans. I hope to create a statewide, robust, laser-focused financial literacy program that ultimately meets the needs of everyone who needs it, beginning with young kids in elementary school, but no unfunded mandates. I come with my local elected leader hat, no unfunded mandates. And begin to substitute the kind of math skills into the curriculum where kids learn basic financial literacy skills. For example, I'm going to start at no cost to the taxpayer, a college savings plan for every kid ID'd initially on the free lunch program and ultimately on the subsidized lunch program.
How do you do that?
Bank fees. Other treasurers in the country have done it. I have been talking to them. In fact, a woman who is the head of the National Treasurers Association has achieved it in her state. They have the structure of the legislation and how you get it done. You're working with the banks who give each kid a savings fund, but they have the money. They're holding it. So they're earning money on the float and on the growth. And kids begin to learn basic financial literacy around their own college savings plan, but they also are 7 times more likely to go to college. I'm for voc schools. I am for apprenticeship programs. But as we look at the 21st century, and you and I both read Boston Business Journal, where's the growth? Healthcare fields, high tech, biotech. Kids are going to need at least an associate's degree to have the skill set for those fields. And that combined with what's called, and I don't know if you know of it, the dual credit program. Are you familiar with this?
I'm not. Go.
It is high schools working with community colleges and public colleges, giving kids as their juniors and seniors in high school credit towards that college
I think
degree.
they're trying to do something like that with Bunker Hill Community College
Yes.
and Madison Park. Okay. Now, and those are great ideas.
Yeah. It's how we're going to get these kids to have the skills to fit the jobs here.
And I'm sure your opponents in the primary and in the general election, when you win the primary, will also have some good ideas. How do you set yourself apart from them? Because it seems on the surface you're all good Democrats and you're all thoughtful, well-intentioned people. How do you set yourself apart from that in this with 3 weeks left to go?
Well, I think the same way I won the Democratic convention. Here I was running against a state senator and a state representative who had a built-in vote. Literally, the reps and the senators support their colleagues. And I just got out there in front of people and I said, this is who I am. This is why I'm running. This is what the treasurer's office does. A lot of people don't focus on what the treasurer can do and what the treasurer can't do, actually. You know, people sometimes talk about public policy positions that they're passionate about, but it may not apply to the job. And I said, and this is why I'm running and what I can do in this job. I think that there is a major difference between me and the gentleman I'm running against. The treasurer's office is an office with 9 departments, or even more if you include in some of the tangential ones. You have 800 employees. 400 of the employees are union employees. No one I'm running against has ever negotiated a collective bargaining agreement or has managed large groups of people. It's really an executive function. And this is the unusual background that I have how I'm different. That I have had that background, managing people, negotiating collective bargaining agreements, and in fact, from the management side, have learned to blend democratic values with running things well. Town of Brookline, everybody jokes about Brookline. We have the plastic bags, we have the styrofoam cups.
I'm not going to mention anything.
But what I'm trying to say to you is, I come out of that environment of being able to do that and yet can stand in front of a progressive group of people and say we do nothing that impacts the AAA bond rating. Because in the business that we came from, we were run very well. The only reason we went through a hostile takeover was the crash of '87, stock market crash, when our crash dropped in half and green mailers bought in. I mean, it was a classic Wall Street move, but otherwise we were known to be a safe mom and pop stock in a company that was well run, that had no excessive spending, worked on thin margins, and took care of people.
When you see this, and not to detract from what we're talking about, but when you see this happening with the market basket, does it kind of bring up some nightmarish scenarios? It is different. It's a private company. It's family-owned, technically.
Well, you know,
not a publicly traded company.
You're not the first person to ask me this. Yeah. The Globe, John Keller, everyone has asked me about it. Firstly, I'd like to say that this is a tragedy for the 25,000 families, but it's not just those families. If there's a small business owner in a strip mall next to a market basket, that person is being badly hurt. The vendors are being hurt. The suppliers are being hurt. And the Merrimack Valley economy. And so I think that this private feud that's going on is tragic. I think it's a remarkable situation in terms of the relationships of the employees and Arthur T. But in terms of us, it's actually the exact opposite. My grandfather divided the stock equally among his siblings.
So there was no dispute.
There was no dispute. My father and my mother worked there. I was going to work there. I'd be there today. We were forced out because we wouldn't fire our employees after a private equity group in Wall Street took us over. So it's quite different. And in fact, a Globe reporter, Shirley Leung, said to me, how do you feel about not being at Stop and Shop anymore? And how do your parents feel? And I said, it's still devastating. We went down to Quincy for the 100-year anniversary, and there were people there who walked up and said, Mr. and Mrs. Goldberg, Debbie, they call me Debbie, that shows how far back. And they said, Deb, we miss you so much. And it was bittersweet. It was bittersweet. I'm a grocer. But I also think there are basic values about that, and that what I learned and how I felt about my role in life, I bring to the treasurer's office. Use all my background, use my skills. Remember, every day it's about people. It's about making sure that women are paid what they're worth because it's a family issue, not just a woman's issue. Making financial literacy programs available to immigrants, culturally sensitive, in a language that people understand. Free tax prep. We're going to work with nonprofits. I was driving along the highway into a city, and I saw these storefronts that said tax prep, tax prep. So I turned to somebody and said, This is not a retail operation I'm familiar with. Can someone please look into this? People who don't understand how to fill out tax returns walk in, they're given cash up front, which is a percentage of their refund, and then the company turns and gets the full refund for people who can least afford it. So we're going to work with nonprofits and get that done.
Well, okay, we've got just a few minutes left. So 3 weeks left. How do you get up over the top here now? Are you, so much was made, of course, when Tim Cahill was elected treasurer
Yes.
by the Tim for Treasurer ad by his daughter. Now, we've come a long way since then, but
I think there are a lot of people who've looked for that.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Are you looking for? Is there a Deb for Treasurer moment coming?
Well, I think there has been. I mean, it's critical to communicate with the voter. When I would go into a community during the pre-convention and caucus time, 70% of the people would be undecided. And that's sort of typical. And when all three of us would present our positions and I was able to communicate with people, I'll never forget getting a call from Representative Sarah Peake from the Wellfleet and Eastham and Provincetown and Truro group. I got 57% of the vote. And it was merely my ability to, I think, communicate my passion and where the differences were. Good people running.
So if given a chance to, state your case, you're comfortable, you're confident.
I feel comfortable and
you
confident.
have the money to
we
go
have the money
on,
to communicate. We're on the air. I don't know if you've seen the ad. I will tell you, I was at the Falmouth Road race yesterday. True story. Woman came up to me and she went, wage equality. She said, college savings plan. She started telling me my ad. She said something about the future. And I said, opportunity? And she said, opportunity. And then I said, one more thing that was important to me. And she goes, adoption. And I said, and that little boy had his 24th birthday the night before, Saturday night. And so I hugged her. I said, of course. I mean, that amazed me. And then, so it's how you have to communicate.
Does being the only woman in the race help you?
Well, I kind of like it better than last time.
Does being the only non-elected official in the race, and of course, as you said, you've served in office before, but given what happened in the recent probation trial of John O'Brien, does that kind of leave a smell that helps you?
I think that this is a Democratic primary. I don't need to tell you that Democrats are electing Democrats and we are electing Democrats over and over, and we're comfortable with our leaders. And I'm comfortable with our leaders in general. I do think that being the only woman doesn't harm me. And I think it's the woman who can do the job. And I think I make it very clear that the treasurer's job is not a legislative job. It really isn't. It is managing all the cash that comes in from all the taxpayer dollars and all the things we do. You want someone who understands debt management and cash management. Those aren't sexy, but you also want someone who can not only do that, but is making a commitment to programs that will definitely make opportunity available for people. And that's a combination that a Democratic primary voter cares about. Being able to do the job, but also remembering it's about people.
Going to invest that money in little banks that help people or in big banks that provide the biggest return?
Well, we are going to do a lot of both. I am looking at the community banking partnership is great. It takes funds, your cash dollars, my cash dollars, and gives it to local banks who are going to make things available to people who have a more challenging time getting it. Women, small business owners, you know that getting loans for the last couple of years. That's our middle class. Yeah. That's who's going to build our middle class. I mean, that same middle class are the people who are selling the lottery tickets that we need to make sure are okay. The first generation immigrant families who have convenience stores. It's the same group of people. So I want to do a full analysis of that program, see how we can get more banks involved. What are we doing right? You know, what are we might we not be doing right that we can do better, and try to grow that program. But I'm also looking at a state-owned bank. A state-owned bank focused on putting our money in that and looking at how do we rebuild infrastructure? How do we create a transportation system? We don't have the tax dollars to do that.
It's an old idea that might come back to
I think it's a great idea.
That's what they used to have. Again, Deb Goldberg is running for state treasurer. She is a successful businesswoman, philanthropist, political activist. There's 3 candidates in the Democratic primary for state treasurer, a very important post, and as always, incredibly well-spoken and thoughtful.
Thank you, Joe.
And you still sound as good as you did 8 years ago, and best of luck to you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming in and joining us.
I can't wait to serve, and it would be an honor to be your treasurer.
All right. I hope you'll come back when you are.
Absolutely.
All right. Again, Deb Goldberg, Democrat running for state treasurer. Unfortunately, we're out of time for tonight. You're watching Talking the Neighborhoods here in the Boston Neighborhood Network. We're here tonight and every Monday night. We'll be back next week at the same time. Joining us, Attorney General candidate Warren Tolman, and more of local politics, as is our usual want. Stay tuned and join us then.